Welcome to It's Your Space. I'm Mary Cox, Seattle-based, New York-bred interior designer who firmly believes that subconsciously, design choices psychologically and physically influence how you feel in a space. This podcast will introduce you to the science behind how your environment impacts your well-being. I'm often asked what my process is for designing a space. It's easy. I listen. Because the truth is, you actually know what you want, and I know how to get you there. My dad was a New York City fireman and spent years riding in the back of a hook and ladder truck. In those days, the rear cab was open, and during one response, he was thrown from the truck after it struck a tree. He broke his back, an injury that would affect him for the rest of his life. Growing up, I watched my father raise 6 children while living with chronic pain. Like so many firefighters of his generation, he rarely complained. He showed up for work, showed up for his family, and carried the physical and emotional demands of the job with remarkable resilience. In 1991, enclosed cabs became mandatory on hook and ladder trucks, making the job safer in many ways. Today's firefighters are better protected from many of the visible dangers my father faced. But as safety measures have evolved, new questions have emerged about some of the invisible hazards of the profession. Modern firefighters rely heavily on radios, headsets, wireless communication systems, long shifts, and around-the-clock connectivity. While these technologies help crews communicate and stay safe, researchers are increasingly studying whether long-term exposure to electromagnetic and radio frequency radiation may have unintended health consequences. Firefighters spend their careers protecting us from dangers we can see. But what happens when the threat is invisible? Our guest today is a former firefighter, an EMF specialist whose own journey led him to study electromagnetic fields and their potential impact on human health. As research continues to examine links between EMF exposure, neurological symptoms, and increased cancer risks among firefighters, the conversation becomes much bigger than the fire service. It challenges us to think differently about the environments we live in and work in, and how the things we can't see may influence our well-being. It's a fascinating discussion, and one we're excited to share with you. And that is why we are so excited to have Shane Reilly as our guest today. Welcome, Shane.
Hey, Mary. Great to be here.
Do you know, one of the earliest studies linking firefighters and RF radiation exposure involved 6 California firefighters. They had spent up to 90 hours a week in fire stations located near cell towers. And within 5 years, the previously healthy men began suffering from severe neurological symptoms. Testing and brain scans revealed significant abnormalities in all 6 firefighters. The scans showed pervasive hyperexcitability of neurons, suggesting that RF radiation exposure was causing continuous neuronal firing, preventing the brain from resting. Firefighters in California successfully lobbied lawmakers for statewide exemptions that prevented telecommunication companies from installing small cell networks on fire stations. Was this something that you experienced?
I think my symptoms were perhaps a little different. I don't have any scans or things like that some of these firefighters did, but I did notice that as, about a 30-year-old young, healthy male, working out all the time, eating really well. This was when paleo was coming online. I was having debilitating symptoms on the job as well as when I went home. Things like brain fog, aches and pains in my body that seemed beyond what I would expect from a workout or something like that. Difficulty sleeping, difficulty staying awake during the day. Even like weird skin rashes. So I had a whole host of symptoms that just really confused me, didn't seem to line up with all the good, healthy things I was doing in my life. So it got to the point where my performance suffered, and I felt like I was letting my team down, letting the other firefighters down. I wasn't able to perform to the standard that we needed to perform to do our job, to do that important work. And so I ended up actually leaving that career behind, which was heartbreaking. It's such a difficult thing to get into. It's such a wonderful job, so fulfilling, team oriented. There's nothing like rolling up to a house that's on fire at 3 a.m. and knowing that it's you and your fellow firefighters who can do something, to save people, to save structures.
How long did you do that?
I was doing that for about 4 years.
Wow.
So I hung on for a while, but it just became untenable. And there really weren't any answers in nutrition, exercise, visits to the doctor. Nothing really helped me improve what I was experiencing. The only thing that made a change was when I left the field, and I started sleeping better, and I could think more clearly, and all these things kind of slowly went away. And as my brain got a little clearer, I thought about that world, that firefighting world, and right off the bat, right, it can be a very stressful world, high stress situations.
Right.
But you're also up all night, which breaks the human circadian rhythm, right? Like we kind of start to take sleep for granted sometimes, but it's so important. And if we don't get that rest, things are going to start breaking down. So I started sleeping better. I could think better. And I realized that in the fire station, besides being up all night, under bad artificial lighting, I had a cell phone, I had a pager, I had a walkie-talkie. There was commercial grade Wi-Fi in the building. There was a radio transmitter and receiver in the building. And these are all technologies that use over-the-air forms of EMF, or electromagnetic fields, right? We call it RF, radio frequency. And there's a whole gamut, but it's cellular, it's radio, it's Wi-Fi, it's Bluetooth. So I had this moment of awareness where I realized that I was just in a soup of those things on a 24-hour shift. And one of the benefits of that whole paleo movement back then is it was also kind of the rise of the health podcast. So I actually did, towards the tail end of my time in firefighting, hear a little bit about this EMF thing. And so a few light bulbs were going off in my head. But once I got clear of that career, it really became apparent why it didn't work for my body.
Shane, are you willing to share the story about your mom?
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece in my journey, certainly, but also for others to understand how this can impact us. But I kind of got better after firefighting, like I said, and just sort of went about my life. I implemented some very basic EMF changes in my home environment that we can get to at some point. And, it was doing great. Kids, family, things were going really well. And then just a couple years later, after I left firefighting, my mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor, a glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive form of brain cancer. And you basically don't survive from it. Certainly not more than months to a couple years. And my mom was gone in 8 months.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. So another crushing blow that life dealt me.
Mm-hmm.
And with some of my newfound awareness around EMF, I put the same lens to my mom's life. And she was extremely social. She was a wonderful person, just very outgoing. And as a result, she had many friends and she loved her cell phone. She was always talking on her cell phone. And the tumor was on the same side of the head that she held her cell phone up to.
Wow.
Additionally, she loved her iPad, right? And loved her Wi-Fi and, had that thing on her nightstand. And there were power lines about 15 feet outside of her second story townhome bedroom. So I started kind of putting all these pieces together, and I had purchased a very basic EMF tester at that point. And as we were kind of emptying her house out and clearing it out for sale and all that after she passed, I took some readings and it was off the charts, on this little dinky meter.
That's unbelievable.
So that was kind of the final straw, right? The universe is sending me a message or something, right? There's something to this EMF thing. I was really, really convinced that EMF was a big driver in my mom getting a tumor. She just did not have any awareness around all the technology in her life and the bad things, the downsides that it can present. And so I decided I wanted to help raise awareness because so few knew about this. And you could even say that today, it's still relatively unknown. It's, kind of an inconvenient truth because people really like their technology. Technology does good things. I'm not here to say otherwise, but we just need to understand the downsides that come with it and how to use it in a slightly different, more hygienic way, if you will. And so I did a little bit of Google searching, and I found the Building Biology Institute in New Mexico and saw that they had a variety of trainings and certifications around making the built environment healthier. And I said, where do I sign? And went through their certification course to become educated on identifying and then removing or remediating excessive EMF exposures. And that was in 2017. So just about almost a decade, I've been out in the field doing that work and helping people make their built environment healthier.
When we spoke on the phone, I shared with you that I have a personality, I research everything. Like, I've always been like that. And something came across my plate that said about cell phones and, causing brain tumors or causing things by having it being held to your ear. And it made sense to me. Do you know what I mean? I was like, well, of course that would make sense. It's coming in, you're taking the signal, whereas when you're on a landline, you have a long cord, it's magnified what somebody's saying, and you're hearing the magnification of that connection, right?
Yeah.
And as I said to you that I, way back when, was somebody who didn't want ear pods. Everything had to be away from me. Even now, like I have little headsets, but the phone is way far away from me. And I get a lot of flack for it because people are like, really, just put the AirPods in. I'm like, no. But this has gone on for a long time. So I think I had a gut feeling that this probably isn't good for you. Do you know what I mean? So I listened to a program on NPR, and it was called Resistance of a Cow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you listen to it?
Oh, I did. I know the story.
That was a really crazy story, but cell phone towers and cell phone structures, it started in Denmark and then it opened up so that it was Minnesota. Then Arizona would come out. And all these states joined in when they realized, which sounds really crazy, that the cows were not drinking water. They wouldn't drink it. And they said, what's going on here? At some point they stopped milking. They were like, what's going on? And they realized that the electricity that was being fed in the ground, in the water, they were actually, from my understanding, getting shocks from, meaning they'd drink the water and be like, whoa, no. So they weren't going to touch the water. And there's a whole thing called, I think they talk about it there, stray voltage.
Mm-hmm.
So the voltage that's coming from all these electronic towers and cell phones, et cetera, are actually going into the water, into the ground. And wondered if you had like any personal experiences of how that is affecting us.
It's a really fascinating story for sure. And maybe I can just give a little context on it. Most of the world, including North America, uses an electrical grid or an electrical system that returns most of the current back to the utility through the soil, which may surprise some people. But we know in a circuit, power goes one way into the light bulb and then it returns back to the source.
Mm-hmm.
And to save money, as the electrical grid grew rapidly and then demands on it grew rapidly, the utilities decided to implement something called a multi-grounded neutral system. And we don't have to get too geeky on that, but the main point for people to understand here is that most of the return current going back to utility in many parts of the world actually goes through the soil.
Which I never knew that till I heard the stray voltage stories, and then they were from farmers. I forget how many thousand different farmers had experienced it across the United States.
Yeah.
And how it was affecting the animals.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's this secondary issue here that has to do with how certain machinery and appliances are wired, where current can go into them, go into the case, the metal case of them. It can get onto the grounding portion of that machinery or that equipment, and it can go places where we don't want it to go, such as, a concrete pad that the feeding trough of a cow is on, or the pen that they're supposed to sleep in. So that's another related way that stray voltage can happen. But yeah, in that story, and this is kind of well known in my colleague circles, but they noticed production of the cows went way down. And of course, the dairy industry and farmers are very important. They're a very powerful part of our economy, providing, good food and all that to us. And so they made a lot of noise about it, and were able to get some action from government, from utility, to reduce that stray voltage potential. And some practices have been developed around it to ensure that doesn't happen. And this is well known. Any electrician can measure this type of thing. It's not, some super out there concept. This is a kind of a core concept of physics, and electricians are very well aware of it. But the interesting thing is, and this just happened to me with a client in rural Washington state, they had a slab tile floor on the main level of their house. And my client could actually feel something akin to, not full on electrocution, right? But we call it contact current in the building biology world, where it's micro amps of current, but you can perceive it, and it's injecting foreign current onto your body. So you feel kind of a little zap or a little tingle when you touch certain surfaces in the home. And that's because that slab, that foundation slab in this particular home, has the grounding system connected to it. So it has current going through it. And doing some basic measurements there, I identified that what's called the neutral earth voltage, which is another way to say stray voltage, was elevated. But this is where it gets funny. In this case, cows are more important than humans, because for residential, the utility will not do anything. The limit that they will tolerate for a home is much, much higher than for a dairy farm, for example. So it's been
Wow.
extremely difficult to get the utility to fix this woman's home who is getting shocked, basically, in her home.
Is it a certain spot in her home or just anywhere in her home?
It's different spots. One place you'll see this pop up a lot is with plumbing pipes. So, for example, if you were in the shower or the bath and one part of your body touched the drain, which is metal, and another was reaching to turn on the hot water, you would be completing a circuit, right? And there's this straight voltage, the straight current is flowing through you, through the metal pipes, because those all connect back to the electrical system at some point.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's really sad that, the kind of the ways that the utilities have pushed this into our homes and onto us to save money on, wires out at the power pole by sending it back through the soil. So it's very unfortunate.
Is there something right now that is in process but hasn't been pushed through? Like we said, the cows, they turned around. It was big business, right? So therefore the changes were made. But has there been anything, when you talked about building biology and building healthy homes, right? We're back to that. So is there anything in place with changes being made?
There are practices in how we construct a home and things we can do in a home to lessen the potential for stray voltage. Sometimes it is utility derived almost completely. And trying to get the utility to move on a topic like this is very difficult, next to impossible. And the thinking is that if problems were acknowledged with the way the electrical grid is set up in North America, the utilities would go bankrupt from litigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now they have decades and decades and decades of using these systems in this way. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely difficult in some cases to fix if it's completely utility derived, but there are very good ways in how we build a home and changes we can make in the electrical that can reduce the potential for contact current, stray voltage, things like that.
So being an EMR specialist, do you find that your specialty is being used more by architects and designers throughout the industry? I mean, I had never done a deep dive on it until I met Alexandra Emel, an architect who has used you, and then May from EcoNest. And then that's when I just intuitively knew this is not a good idea, So I wondered if you felt that there's a little shift, and if not, we need to make it happen with architects and designers.
Yeah, there is definitely a swell of awareness in the wider population these days around EMF awareness and acceptance. And so a lot of clients are asking their design teams to incorporate not just, healthy materials in the building, healthy, water filtration systems, high-end air filtration systems to make all those things clean, but also to make this invisible electromagnetic radiation reduced as much as possible from the design phase on. And so, yes, a lot of architects and designers are turning to building biology and to specialists like me to get that support.
I know that on your website, you talked about cell phone towers by playgrounds and at schools, and schools were famous for offsetting whatever the cost of the building or the cost of their upkeep to put a cell phone tower nearby, where the kids are playing. That was fascinating. It was on your website, and I listened to you talk about it, about their little brains and their cells not being able to handle what's coming at them.
Yeah. In my little neck of the woods in Lake Oswego, Oregon, I think it's been a while since I made that video, but I think there's 11 school properties, and 9 of them have a cell tower either on the school grounds or, like right across the street.
Wow.
So there is something to, why would they do that? And there's probably a money component to it. Absolutely. But it's especially important in a school setting, as you just touched on, because children are not adults and they are impacted by this type of radiation. It could be Wi-Fi, it could be 4G, 5G, cell tower stuff, but they're impacted much differently. Their heads are much larger versus, the rest of their body. The skulls are thinner, they're still growing, and their neurons, their nerve tracts are not fully myelinated. They're not fully insulated until they get to their, mid 20s. That's why car insurance is so high on one reason why on 18-year-old males, because their brains aren't quite finished cooking yet, right?
Right.
So kids are impacted disproportionately to adults. Plus, they are going to have a lifetime of exposure to this type of energy. Whereas you and I, for a big chunk of our lives, we grew up without much of this stuff around, much of this wireless stuff, right? So the body can compensate, it can repair damage, but it only has so much of a reservoir for that. And so eventually these DNA breaks and malfunctions can exceed the system's capacity to repair and turn into a cancer or some other disease process. So children, pregnant women, there's sensitive populations like that we regulate much more strictly on things like lead and asbestos and different environmental exposures that we're all familiar with. They usually add a safety factor in there, times 10 or something for sensitive populations like this. So it's really something to take seriously. I'm actually working with a client now who lives across very close to a cell tower installation on one of these school properties that I mentioned, and they have just added a second tower right next to the first one. And they can look out their bedroom window on a line and see this new tower and the old one about 115 feet away.
That's mind-boggling. What do you do to circumvent that besides having them move?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind here. And the first is that it's important to let people know that for over the air, for wireless types of radiation, there is it's not even like a safe level. It's just an exposure guideline that was established in the early 90s. And it was based on 6 lab rats and the ability of this radiation to heat or not heat their tissue. And so is really not applicable to long-term exposure in humans, like if you live with a cell tower 115 feet, or if you're in a classroom with a commercial grade Wi-Fi router above your desk for 6 to 7 hours a day. And that standard or guideline from the FCC has not changed since 1996. And I would just challenge everyone to think about how vastly different the wireless profile of our environment is in those 30 years. It has changed significantly. Many, many more devices, many, many more bands of wireless radiation, much stronger power densities that we are exposed to in places of work, school, out and about in a city park. So the guidelines and those regulations say that if the radiation is not able to heat your tissue, there's no problem. And so many efforts to get a cell tower taken down kind of crash on the rocks of that standard that is so out of date. And we now have hundreds and hundreds of studies that show at non-heating, non-ionizing, as it's called, levels of radiation produces DNA strand breaks, DNA damage, and other negative health outcomes on the body. So it's really time for the FCC to look at the science and update their guidelines. But the other thing, as far as this particular situation, is that we do have very good shielding products and things that we can implement in a home that will essentially reflect this type of radiation away from the home. So it's shielding paint, it's shielding materials that go inside the wall that can reduce what comes through the wall into the home. And in some cases, that can work. But if you're starting out with the amount of power that you would get from a cell tower being so close, it may not be enough.
So this is really, as you're telling this story, it's making me angry because I think, what can we do? What can people do? I mean, when you are laying out facts, they're not made up, they're facts. The story that I tell about the 6 firefighters that they studied, it's fact. This is what happened to them. And I'm sure there's studies of cell phone towers. So I guess, and this is being very Pollyanna-ish, I think, well, why aren't those school boards from the 9 schools standing up, doing something, getting momentum behind them, lobbying? I mean, to me, it's like, okay, come on, let's go. These are the facts. You need to change it.
Yeah. Well, I do think that a grassroots movement of the people is really important, and there's more and more of that. There's more and more people talking about this. But similar to the question earlier on, like, why isn't utility doing anything? Why are they favoring the cows over the humans? This is big business. These wireless companies, this is big business. And again, the liability piece, if harm was ever to be connected to these products, huge liability there. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine here in the Portland area, Peter Cowan, who writes an excellent Substack. I don't know if you heard about this, but back in January, he had been doing some thinking about the San Francisco 49ers, an NFL team. And for some time now, they have been among the most injured team every season. They suffer the most injuries.
Wow.
Right. And so he was like, why is that? What's going on here?
Yeah, right.
And then he realized that there is a utility electrical substation like right next to the training facility that the 49ers use. And he went down there and he took some readings of the magnetic field emissions from this station and the power lines that come in and out of it. And he found very, very high levels. And then he did some research. He's an excellent researcher and thinker into some of the effects that we have found from the magnetic field type of EMF on soft tissue in the body, cartilage, ligaments, tendons. And he was able to develop a plausible mechanism for how exposure to this kind of thing could weaken, your joints, your cartilage, your tendons, all those things in an athlete who has very high demands on their body, right? And so that could be one reason why the 49ers have been amongst the most injured, in recent memory in the NFL. And this story absolutely blew up. His original post on X has over 20 million views at this point, and it's been 6 months.
Have the 49ers contacted him or anything?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. So this was being talked about on sports radio shows across the country. Peter was being interviewed left and right. It generated so much awareness, which is wonderful. Many people for the first time having to think about, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, I didn't know about this. Maybe there's something there. it got to the point, there was so much pressure that the 49ers hired kind of a mystery expert to do some readings. This person was never revealed who it was. The report has never been revealed what the specifics are, how they tested, what they did. They just said it was 400 times lower than the limits, right? But again, these limits are for short-term occupational type exposures, and they're really to limit like overstimulation of muscles and nerves, like where you could start twitching or get temporarily frozen, paralyzed on the job, which would be bad. But they're not really for long-term exposure. But this has continued to brew and brew, and the 49ers, I guess, thought that they could kind of hush and push it under the rug. Hey, we did the report, nothing to see here. And just today,
no way,
I saw that they have announced that they are going to be probably moving their practice facility because they need more room, not because of EMF.
Are you kidding me? That happened today.
So
okay,
grassroots can work on this, and pushing back against the school board, against the state government, whatever it might be, it can work.
And I know that since we're always giving our listeners tips on how to improve the quality of their well-being in their spaces, can you give our listeners any advice on how to help change the environments they're living in now? Because so many of my friends, when I told them you were coming on the program, and explained different things, they were like, I can't wait to hear this. I didn't know that. Me, as a designer, am now very aware. Do you know what I mean? But let's say you're living in a house, you're not in a financial position to move out of it, and you have 2 young kids, let's say, okay? Let's just say all that. Or even, let's throw in for fun, there's a cell tower down the street. Let's just throw that in. Okay, so what would you do, okay? And Shane, give them like, okay, you can buy this product, or the simple things like moving, I think it's 3 feet away from you, a cell phone, correct?
Yeah, that's where I was going to start. As far as low-cost, very practical options, there's this concept called the inverse square law. And what it says is if we take a source of electromagnetics, could be your cell phone, could be a light bulb, anything that uses that electromagnetic energy, if you double your distance away from it, so if you go from 1 foot away to 2 feet away, the exposure, the strength of the radiation goes down by 4 times. And if you triple your distance, so if you go to 3 feet away from the source, the strength goes down 9 times. So a little distance leads to a massive drop in your exposure. So in practical terms, speaking on your cell phone on speakerphone, that gets it away from your brain.
Got it. Or how about headsets that are on wired?
Yes. So a wired headset. Yeah, if you need that privacy or sound quality, a wired headset. Now your phone can be, on the table 3 feet away from you, right? So, and it's not just your cell phone. I want you to think about anything that sends and receives a signal through the airwaves. It could be AirPods. It could be your smartwatch. It could be your smart speaker. It could be the cell phone, the Wi-Fi router, the laptop. We know that this type of energy disrupts processes in the body that impact your sleep. We know that the light from your iPad or your smartwatch, if you see it after the sun goes down, will delay your melatonin release and therefore disrupt your sleep quality. So it doesn't have to be a huge cell tower down the street. It can be very small things, and they can be even very low power, like battery. But it's so close to your body in the case of an AirPod or a smartwatch that with that inverse square law, the exposure is very strong because it's so close. So distance, yes, that's the big one. So we're not going to have our watch or our cell phone on the nightstand by our bed. We're going to have that in the bathroom or down the hall or even, in airplane mode.
How about if you have like a PC and so you have an Xfinity box? It's a good 4 feet away from you. Is the screen just projecting what the Wi-Fi is coming into your house? Do you know what I mean? Because it's going into the Comcast Xfinity box, and then wires are hooked up to the screen for you to be able to see like I am seeing you.
Well, screens are a big one, and we haven't touched on this much yet, but the tiny little sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is visible light, has a huge impact on our biology, right?
Oh, great. Thanks a lot.
All of our screens and our light bulbs, they can really work against our circadian rhythm. And so in practical terms, if we're looking for practical solutions, you want to be very careful about the type of light you see when the sun is down. We need to have warm lighting, much more like firelight. And there are settings on phones and screens that can do this. There's software out there such as Iris, which is a good one, which will mitigate some of the effects of this artificial light. The next thing is it's kind of related to distance, is using a wired cable. And you touched on this earlier for your connection for as many devices in your home as is feasible. Many routers, you just buy an Ethernet cable from Amazon or wherever. It is plug and play. You plug it into your router, you get a little adapter for your laptop, you plug it in, you turn the Wi-Fi off on your laptop, and you have reduced your exposure significantly.
Really?
You can even get the actual router now, the Wi-Fi router, you can get it so that it has additional features like an auto on-off timer. We don't leave the kitchen faucet on around the clock, right? Why do we need to leave the Wi-Fi on? So let's turn it off when we go to sleep, have it set automatically. You can buy a $5, wall plug timer on Amazon and set it to go off at 10 and come on at 7. And then you have reduced that very important time of sleep, the exposures that you get. So that's another really easy one.
Yeah, that's a really, I'm getting one right now. I'm like, I'm in. And I know that just with our conversations that you and I have had, before the podcast, I was doing things like moving my cell phone, right? And thinking, okay, it better be this far away. And then putting something, I don't know if it was effective because I like to keep it on as an alarm, the cell phone. But then I'd put something in front of it to block it so it wasn't directly in line with my head. I don't know if that's effective, but that was since I talked to you. I was just okay.
I like your thinking. It's intuitive, and there are materials that can block some of this radiation. And you're keying in on an important detail. And many phones in airplane mode will still transmit, and that's in one case related to like the Find My iPhone feature. It will still send out a blip periodically so that the phone can be located if it's lost. So getting a Faraday bag.
Faraday? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a fabric-y bag made of a conductive material that will limit how much of that radiation can come out of the phone. So that's really useful if for some reason you need to carry the phone on your person, which is not recommended. And again, even in airplane mode, the phone can still be transmitting. So it's best to get a Faraday bag or to keep it in a purse or a backpack, or just challenge yourself. Like, do I really need the phone with me on this walk? Do I really need it when I run into the grocery store for 5 minutes? Can it just hang out in the car?
Yeah.
That's another very practical, easy way. We're thinking about the 24-hour day. If our exposure is this much, where can I start chipping away little by little? And sleep would be a super important time, but any exposure that we can chip away at with simple techniques can make a big difference long term.
That's extraordinary. In the fact that, like, I listen to podcasts a lot. Obviously, that's why I started this one. But I usually have headsets on with a wire that's plugged into a thing on my hip, which is in a little pouch thing that I carry my car keys and shove the cell phone in there. And now I'm thinking to myself, wow, I wonder if that cell phone is screwing up my hip.
Yeah.
And I have no idea, but now since you've made me aware, I'm like, okay, maybe I have to get one of those bags.
You can get a bag, you can get a phone case, which may be, more aesthetic and easy to slip into a pocket. Yeah.
Oh, a phone case that would protect you?
Yeah, thank you. There are specific phone shielding cases. I would still recommend you download the podcast and have the phone in airplane mode until you actually need to use it to make a call or receive a call or whatever. But that case will be additional protection
right.
because
right.
you may need to Find My iPhone on or whatever it is. And so it may still have some periodic kind of blip.
Very true. I've had to use Find My iPhone many times. But I love all your suggestions, and we are so appreciative. I want you to keep getting out there, okay? We'll do everything we can do to expose you to more designers, the building industry, because what you're doing to me is so important. Especially for even, children's schools, making them safer, or just educating us a little more about the radiation we're being exposed to.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your audience. And I don't want people to go through what I've gone through. I'd like them to be able to avoid some of those personal misfortunes. And this can seem like, a huge undertaking to understand and make changes with, but it's really not. There are very simple things that you can start doing. There are very competent professionals out there that can do a deep dive evaluation on your home and write out a plan for you that's easy to follow. And you can make big changes in your home and gain this awareness, and it will lead to better health, for you and your family. So it really is worth it. And I would just encourage people, if they're interested, if they're struggling, whatever curiosity they may have around this subject, I give everyone 15-minute complimentary discovery call to ask me anything, as they say. And I'm very happy to chat and help people kind of on their EMF journey. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we are all part of this experiment and on this journey. And so if I can be a resource, I would be happy to do that.
Thank you very much. That's so sweet. And I was going to say we have everything posted with the podcast of how to reach you so that people could reach out to you. And thank you for that kind offer, because I think a lot of people will be calling you now. And also, too, I wanted personally to thank you for being a first responder, because that's close to my heart, okay? Having my dad, being a New York City fireman.
Yeah.
And my brother was a New York City police officer. So the first responders, to me, I'm always extremely grateful that you dedicated that to your life. And I'm sorry that it unfortunately had its drawbacks to you continuing in it, because I bet you were good at it.
I definitely loved it. And yeah, unfortunately, a door closed, but this new one has opened. And I have great respect for first responders and for that world. And we should absolutely take care of them. We should absolutely take care of our kids and sensitive populations through EMF awareness.
Right. So it's really interesting that as we finish talking here about this, that like you said, you went full circle. So you were in there running in when my dad used to say, everybody's running out and you're running in, right? And that's what you did as a firefighter. And here you are again, kind of. You're running back in again. You just took it a different way, but it's all about helping people in where they're at right now. And where we're at right now is a scary place. So you're educating all of us to help us. It's all around the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping people to go, okay, we're going to make changes and I'm going to make your lives better, whether you're running in and grabbing them out of a fire or the fire they're in now.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, I did listening to you. I thought to myself, the different roads my life has gone on and down, but I do think to myself that you're still doing the same thing. You're just doing it differently.
That's very true. Yeah, I like that, Mary. I'm glad you shared it.
Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing for all of us and helping us and educating us. And as things move on, we would love to, like we said, have you on a panel with a lot of other experts on how our spaces are being changed and what we can do to make changes in our homes and our work, etc.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to talk about this, like I said. So
thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And we'll be back in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. Thank you. I hope that this podcast will help empower you and teach you how to pursue your vision for your home by becoming aware of how design elements make you feel. We have many creative and inspiring guests joining us in future podcasts, sharing their knowledge and experiences with holistic design. And we're very excited about hearing from all of you and learning about your reactions to different design components. We welcome your comments and likes, and of course, would greatly appreciate you subscribing to our channel. Till next time, remember to start listening to yourself, because it's about you. It's your home. It's your space.